The mansion's lights flickered once, twice, then died completely, plunging the sprawling estate into an eerie darkness that seemed to swallow sound itself. Mico Rodriguez knelt in the basement utility room, his flashlight beam cutting through shadows as thick as velvet curtains. 20 years of electrical work had taught him to listen to houses, and this one was screaming secrets. Behind a false wall panel he'd accidentally triggered while tracing faulty wiring, he discovered something that would shatter everything he thought he knew about wealth, power, and the lengths people would go to protect their lives. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency call had come in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, just as Mico was helping his 8-year-old daughter, Sofia, with her science homework about electrical circuits. The irony wasn't lost on him that she understood conductivity better than most adults, her bright eyes lighting up as she explained how electrons moved through copper wire. When his phone buzzed with the caller ID showing Chen Industries, he almost declined. Corporate emergency calls usually meant dealing with entitled executives who expected miracles at midnight. "Rodriguez Electrical, this is Mico," he answered, balancing the phone between his shoulder and ear while helping Sofia color-code her circuit diagram. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and clearly accustomed to getting immediate results. "Mr. Rodriguez, this is Catherine Wells, executive assistant to Robert Chen. We have a complete power failure at Mr. Chen's Riverside Heights residence. The backup generators aren't functioning, and we need someone immediately. Mr. Chen is hosting international investors tomorrow morning." Mico glanced at Sofia, who was already gathering her homework with the resigned efficiency of a child who'd grown up understanding that emergency calls meant Daddy had to leave. "Ma'am, it's nearly midnight. My standard emergency rate is triple time, and I can't guarantee." "Money isn't a concern, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Chen specifically requested you based on your reputation for discretion and efficiency. Can you be there within the hour?" The address she provided made Mico whistle low under his breath. Riverside Heights was where the city's power brokers lived, houses that cost more than most people earned in several lifetimes. He'd worked in the neighborhood before, usually fixing problems created by contractors who prioritized aesthetics over proper electrical engineering. Rich people loved their hidden panels, concealed wiring, and smart home systems that turned houses into technological mazes. Sofia looked up from packing her backpack, her dark eyes reflecting her mother's intuitive understanding of people. "Is it another rich person who broke their fancy house, Papa?" Mico smiled despite the late hour. Sofia had an uncanny ability to cut through complexity with childlike directness, a trait he both admired and worried about in a world that often punished honesty. "Something like that, mija. Mrs. Hernandez will watch you until I get back." Their neighbor, Elena Hernandez, was a retired teacher who'd become like family since Maria's death 3 years ago. She never complained about emergency babysitting calls, understanding that a single father's work schedule rarely aligned with normal hours. As Mico gathered his tools, Sofia hugged him with a fierce intensity she'd developed since losing her mother, as if every goodbye might be permanent. The drive to Riverside Heights took 23 minutes through empty streets lined with mature oak trees and expensive streetlights that cast everything in warm, golden pools. Mico's beat-up work van looked conspicuously out of place among the Audis and Porsches parked in circular driveways. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The Chen estate sat behind iron gates that opened automatically as he approached, revealing a modern architectural marvel that seemed to float above its manicured landscape. Robert Chen met him at the front door, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of presence that commanded rooms without effort. His handshake was firm, his manner cordial but distant, the practiced charm of someone accustomed to managing people rather than connecting with them. Everything about him suggested control, from his perfectly pressed slacks to the way he spoke in measured sentences that revealed nothing beyond their literal meaning. "Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for coming so quickly. The power failure is complete except for this emergency lighting system. My security consultant believes it might be related to the new smart home integration we had installed last month." As they walked through rooms filled with art that probably cost more than Mico's house, Chen explained the situation with the detached precision of a man discussing quarterly reports. The mansion's electrical system was a maze of modern technology layered over original wiring that dated back 40 years. Previous electricians had created a patchwork of solutions that worked until they didn't, leaving weak points throughout the system. Mico nodded along, asking technical questions about load distribution and circuit mapping, but part of his attention wandered to the house itself. Despite its obvious wealth, something felt hollow about the space, like a beautiful shell with no soul inside. Family photographs were notably absent, replaced by abstract art and awards celebrating Chen Industries' various achievements. The house felt more like a corporate showroom than a home where people actually lived and loved and argued over breakfast choices. The basement utility room was where houses revealed their true nature, and the Chen mansion's underbelly told a story of hasty modifications and expensive band-aid solutions. Mico traced circuits with methodical patience, his trained eye catching inconsistencies that suggested recent unauthorized work. Someone had been modifying the electrical system without permits, adding loads and circuits that didn't appear on any of the official blueprints Chen had provided. It was while following a suspicious circuit behind the water heater that Mico's screwdriver accidentally triggered a hidden mechanism. A section of what appeared to be solid concrete wall shifted inward with a soft hydraulic whisper, revealing a space that shouldn't exist according to the house's architectural plans. His flashlight beam penetrated the darkness beyond, illuminating what looked like a small apartment hidden within the mansion's foundation. The air that emerged carried the antiseptic smell of medical equipment mixed with something else, something that made Mico's protective instincts flare like warning lights. This wasn't just a hidden room. This was a place where someone lived, someone who wasn't supposed to be found. Mico's breath caught in his throat as his flashlight revealed the impossible. The hidden room stretched beyond his initial estimate, containing what appeared to be a fully equipped medical suite tucked away beneath Robert Chen's mansion. Hospital-grade monitors lined one wall, their screens dark but ready, while an adjustable bed dominated the center of the space. The air filtration system hummed quietly, maintaining a sterile environment that spoke of long-term occupancy rather than emergency preparation. But it was the personal touches that made his hands tremble. Children's drawings were taped to one wall, their bright crayon colors a stark contrast to the clinical white surfaces. A stuffed elephant sat on a small table beside medical equipment worth more than Mico's annual income. Someone lived here. Someone young, and the careful attention to comfort suggested they weren't here by choice. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Chen's voice echoed down the basement stairs, sharp with concern. "Is everything all right down there?" Mico quickly triggered the mechanism that closed the hidden panel, his mind racing as he tried to process what he'd discovered. The wall sealed seamlessly, leaving no trace of the secret room behind the water heater. His electrical training kicked in automatically, allowing him to continue his diagnostic work, while his thoughts churned with implications that made his stomach clench. "Just tracing some unusual circuit loads." Mico called back, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "Whoever did your smart home installation took some creative liberties with your electrical code." Chen appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his expensive shoes clicking against the concrete floor. In the harsh light of Mico's work lamps, his face appeared more angular, shadows emphasizing lines that suggested sleepless nights and carefully managed stress. "How long will the repairs take?" "The morning meeting cannot be postponed." Mico made a show of examining circuit breakers, while his mind cataloged everything he'd seen in that hidden room. Medical equipment required significant electrical loads, backup power systems, and careful climate control. The modifications to Chen's electrical system weren't random. They were deliberate, designed to support life-sustaining equipment while remaining invisible to casual inspection. "I'll need a few hours to trace all the circuits and identify the fault," Mico said, buying himself time to think. "Some of these modifications are creating feedback loops that could damage your entire system if not addressed properly." Chen nodded tersely, clearly displeased with the timeline but accepting it as necessary. "I'll be in my study if you need anything. The house staff has been dismissed for the evening, so you'll have privacy to work." Alone again in the basement, Mico's hands moved automatically through familiar diagnostic procedures, while his mind struggled with an impossible decision. Everything he'd seen suggested someone was being held against their will, possibly a child given the drawings and stuffed animal. But confronting a man like Robert Chen required evidence, leverage, and resources that a working-class electrician simply didn't possess. His phone buzzed with a text from Sofia, sent from Mrs. Hernandez's apartment. "Papa, I finished my circuit homework. The electrons are happy now. Love you." The innocence of her message struck him like a physical blow. How many nights had she fallen asleep wondering if he'd come home safely from emergency calls? How many times had he taken for granted the simple freedom of raising his daughter in the open, surrounded by neighbors who knew and cared about them both? The hidden room represented everything that terrified him about the darker corners of wealth and power. Somewhere in this mansion, possibly just feet away from where he stood, another parent might be wondering if their child was safe, might be searching desperately for answers that powerful people had decided they didn't deserve to find. Mico reopened the hidden panel, this time moving more deliberately through the medical suite. His flashlight revealed details he'd missed in his initial shock. The medical equipment was top tier, the kind used in specialized pediatric facilities. Medication schedules were posted on a small bulletin board, written in a careful script that suggested professional medical care. But professional care for what? And for whom? The children's drawings were signed with a name that made his blood run cold. Elena, written in the careful letters of someone learning to write, the E backwards, in the charming way that children often managed. He remembered seeing that name in local news coverage from several years ago. A tragic story about Robert Chen's daughter who died in a car accident along with her mother. The city had mourned with the grieving father, and Chen Industries had established a children's charity in Elena's memory. But if Elena Chen was dead, who had drawn these pictures? And why were they hidden in a room that cost more to maintain than most people's homes? The sound of footsteps above reminded Mico that he was an intruder in more ways than one. He closed the panel again and focused on the official electrical work, methodically checking circuits and documenting problems that would justify the time he'd spent in the basement. But his mind kept returning to those drawings, to the careful medical equipment, to the implications that made his chest tight with fear and anger. By 3 in the morning, Mico had identified and repaired the actual electrical fault, a cascade failure caused by an overloaded circuit that hadn't been properly balanced during the smart home installation. The work was routine, requiring technical knowledge, but not the kind of dramatic intervention that justified Chen's urgency. As he restored power to the mansion, lights flickering on throughout the house like a constellation coming to life, he realized that the electrical problem might have been secondary to Chen's real concern. Had the power failure compromised something in that hidden room? Was that why Chen had seemed so anxious about the timeline? Why he'd specifically requested an electrician known for discretion? Chen reappeared as Mico packed his tools, his relief palpable as lights returned to his mansion. "Excellent work, Mr. Rodriguez. I trust you found the source of our difficulties?" Mico accepted the payment, a check that represented more money than he'd typically make in a month, and nodded professionally. "Cascade failure in your main distribution panel. I've balanced the loads and installed some additional surge protection. You shouldn't have any more problems." But as he drove home through empty streets, Mico knew that his problems were just beginning. The image of those children's drawings burned in his memory. Elena's backwards E, a small detail that carried enormous implications. If Robert Chen was hiding his supposedly dead daughter in a medical facility beneath his mansion, the reasons couldn't be innocent. The next morning arrived with October sunshine that seemed too bright for the darkness Mico carried in his thoughts. Sofia chattered about her upcoming school science fair while he made breakfast, her enthusiasm a stark contrast to his distracted responses. She'd inherited her mother's ability to read his moods, and by the time they reached Lincoln Elementary, her small hand was squeezing his with concerned affection. "Papa, you look sad today. Did the rich man's house make you sad?" Mico knelt to her level outside the school entrance, surrounded by other parents dropping off children who would spend their day learning and playing in safety. Sofia's dark eyes searched his face with the intensity of someone who'd learned early that adults sometimes carried burdens too heavy for explanation. "Sometimes grown-ups have to think about difficult things, Misha. But you don't need to worry about that. Your job is to be 8 years old and amazing at science." Sofia's hug was fierce and trusting, a reminder of everything good that existed in his world. As he watched her skip toward the school entrance, her backpack bouncing with each step, Mico made a decision that would change everything. He couldn't ignore what he'd discovered, couldn't pretend that hidden room didn't exist. But he also couldn't risk Sofia's safety by charging blindly into a confrontation with someone as powerful as Robert Chen. He needed help, allies, and most importantly, he needed to know the truth about Elena Chen and why a dead girl was drawing pictures in a secret medical facility. The answer, he suspected, would require more than electrical expertise to uncover. It would require the kind of courage that had nothing to do with technical training, and everything to do with deciding that some truths were worth the risk of discovering them. The rain drummed against the windows of Murphy's coffee shop as Mico stared at his laptop screen, trying to make sense of the newspaper archives he'd been combing through for the past 3 hours. The accident report from 4 years ago was frustratingly vague. Elena Chen, age 7, and her mother Victoria had died in a single-car collision on Highway 9 during a winter storm. The article mentioned that Elena's body had been too 80 but badly damaged for an open casket service, and that Robert Chen had requested privacy during his time of grief. But the more Mico read, the more inconsistencies emerged. The accident scene photos, available through public records, showed a vehicle that had skidded off an icy road and struck a concrete barrier. The damage was severe, but not necessarily fatal if passengers had been wearing seat belts and had access to immediate medical care. More troubling was the timing. The accident had occurred just weeks after Victoria Chen had filed for divorce and requested full custody of Elena, citing concerns about Robert's mental health and what she called increasingly erratic behavior. Mico's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to meet. I know what you found at the house. Riverside Park, near the old oak tree. Come alone." The message sent ice through his veins. Someone had been watching him, tracking his movements, possibly putting Sofia in danger by association. Against every instinct screaming at him to delete the message and forget everything he'd discovered, Mico found himself driving toward Riverside Park. The autumn afternoon was crisp and clear, families scattered across the playground equipment, while joggers followed the winding paths. He spotted the massive oak tree easily, its gnarled branches creating a natural shelter near the park's edge. A woman sat on a bench beneath the tree, her graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail that suggested years of prioritizing function over fashion. She looked to be in her 50s, with kind eyes that held depths of pain Mico recognized from his own mirror. When she saw him approaching, she stood with the careful movements of someone who'd learned to manage chronic pain. "Mr. Rodriguez, thank you for coming. My name is Lisa Martinez. I was Elena's nurse before the accident, and I've been taking care of her ever since." The words hit Mico like a physical blow. Elena was alive, and this woman had been caring for her in that hidden medical facility. His mind raced with questions, accusations, demands for explanations. But Lisa's expression stopped him. She looked like someone who'd been carrying an unbearable secret for far too long. "She's alive," he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. "Elena Chen is alive, and Robert Chen has been hiding her in his basement." Lisa nodded slowly, tears beginning to track down her weathered cheeks. "The accident was real, Mr. Rodriguez. Victoria died at the scene, but Elena survived with severe traumatic brain injury. The doctors said she'd likely never wake up, that even if she did, she'd require constant medical care for the rest of her life." Mico sat heavily on the bench beside her, trying to process information that challenged everything he thought he understood about human nature. So Chen faked her death rather than care for his disabled daughter? "It's more complicated than that," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Robert was devastated after the accident. He blamed himself, blamed Victoria, blamed the whole world. When the doctors explained Elena's condition, he couldn't accept it. He kept demanding experimental treatments, second opinions, anything that might restore his perfect little girl." The story that emerged over the next hour painted a picture of grief, twisted into something monstrous. Robert Chen had used his wealth and connections to create an elaborate fiction. Elena had officially died from her injuries, but her body had never been buried. Instead, Chen had constructed the medical facility beneath his mansion and hired Lisa to provide round-the-clock care. "I thought it was temporary at first," Lisa explained, her hands trembling as she spoke. "He convinced me that Elena would recover, that the secret was just to protect her privacy during treatment. But months turned into years, and Elena did wake up. She's not the same child she was before the accident, but she's aware, she can communicate, she draws those pictures you saw." Mico felt sick to his stomach. "And you've been part of this deception for 4 years?" Lisa's tears came harder now, years of suppressed guilt and fear finally finding release. "I tried to leave once, tried to contact authorities. Robert made it clear that Elena would disappear permanently if I ever betrayed his trust. He has resources, connections, ways of making problems vanish. I believed him, because I'd seen what happened to Victoria when she tried to take Elena away." The implication hung between them like a physical presence. Victoria Chen's death might not have been an accident at all, but the elimination of a threat to Robert's control over his daughter. The thought made Mico's protective instincts flare, imagining Sofia in Elena's position, trapped and helpless while the world believed her dead. "Why are you telling me this now?" Mico asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Because Elena is getting older, asking questions about why she can't leave her room, why she never sees other children. She remembers fragments from before the accident, talks about wanting to go to school like other kids. And because Robert is talking about making her disappearance permanent if she becomes too difficult to manage." The casual way Lisa delivered that final piece of information chilled Mico to his core. They weren't just talking about hiding a disabled child from the world. They were talking about a man who might murder his own daughter to protect his reputation. "There's something else you need to know," Lisa continued, her voice gaining strength as she committed fully to her confession. "Robert Chen didn't choose you randomly for that electrical work. He's been researching local contractors, looking for someone with the right combination of skills and vulnerabilities. He knows about your wife's death, about Sofia, about your financial struggles." Mico's hands clenched into fists as the full scope of Chen's manipulation became clear. The emergency call, the generous payment, even the specific electrical problems, had all been orchestrated to draw Mico into Chen's web. But why? What did Chen want from a working-class electrician that he couldn't buy from dozens of other contractors? "He's planning something that requires your specific expertise," Lisa said, answering his unspoken question. "The medical equipment keeping Elena stable is sophisticated, but it's also the weak point in his deception. If something happened to that equipment, if Elena died from what appeared to be medical complications, Robert's problem would be solved permanently." The horror of it washed over Mico like cold water. Chen wanted him to sabotage the very equipment keeping his daughter alive, to create an accident that would finally make Elena's death a reality rather than a fiction. The electrical expertise that Mico had spent years developing would become the instrument of a child's murder. "He's going to threaten Sofia," Mico said, the certainty of it making his voice hoarse. "He'll use my daughter to force me to kill his." Lisa nodded grimly. "Robert Chen is a man who views people as assets or liabilities. Elena became a liability when her condition made her less than perfect. You became an asset when he realized your skills could solve his problem. But if you refuse to cooperate, you and Sofia will both become liabilities." They sat in silence for several minutes, watching families enjoy the simple pleasure of an afternoon in the park. Children ran and laughed while their parents watched with the kind of relaxed attention that came from not having to worry about hidden threats. Mico envied them their innocence, their ability to believe that the world was fundamentally safe for those who followed the rules and minded their own business. "We have to get Elena out of there," Mico said finally. "And we have to do it in a way that protects Sofia from retaliation." Lisa's laugh was bitter and exhausted. "How exactly do we rescue a girl who's officially dead from a man who owns half the city? Robert has judges, police, commissioners, and federal officials in his pocket. He's donated millions to children's charities in Elena's memory. Who's going to believe that he's been hiding his disabled daughter in his basement?" But Mico's mind was already working through possibilities, applying the same methodical problem-solving approach he used for complex electrical systems. Every system had vulnerabilities, points where the wrong pressure at the right moment could cause cascade failures that brought down the entire structure. "We need evidence," he said. "Medical records, video footage, something that proves Elena is alive and being held against her will." And we need allies, people with the resources to go up against Chen's influence. Lisa studied him with new interest, perhaps seeing something in his expression that reminded her why she'd reached out to him in the first place. "There might be a way," she said slowly, "but it would require you to go back into that house, to risk everything you've built for Sofia." Mico thought of his daughter's trusting smile, her fierce hugs, her innocent belief that her father could fix anything that was broken. Then he thought of Elena Chen, drawing pictures in a hidden room while the world mourned a girl who was very much alive but completely alone. "Tell me what you need me to do." The emergency alarm pierced through the mansion's silence at exactly 2:15 in the morning, its shrill cry echoing through corridors lined with priceless art. Mico crouched in the electrical junction box he'd accessed through the mansion's service entrance, his fingers working with practiced precision as he manipulated the building's power grid. Lisa had provided him with security codes and timing schedules, information gathered over 4 years of careful observation and growing desperation. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Create a controlled electrical emergency that would force Chen to evacuate the premises while giving them access to Elena's hidden room. But as Mico watched the mansion's security lights flicker and die according to his carefully orchestrated sequence, he knew they were past the point of no return. If Chen suspected sabotage, if the timing went wrong, if any of a dozen variables shifted, Sofia would pay the price for his choices. Lisa's voice crackled through the radio earpiece she'd insisted he wear. "Security system is down." Chen's car just left the driveway, heading toward the office building. "You have maybe 20 minutes before he realizes this isn't a random power surge." Mico moved through the darkened mansion like a shadow, his intimate knowledge of the electrical layout guiding him toward the basement access. The emergency lighting cast eerie shadows that transformed familiar spaces into something alien and threatening. Every creak of the house settling, every distant sound from the street outside, sent adrenaline spiking through his system. The hidden panel opened at his touch, revealing the medical suite bathed in the red glow of battery-powered emergency systems. Lena sat up in her bed, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity that struck Mico like a physical blow. She was small for her age, pale from years without sunlight but unmistakably alive and aware. "Are you here to fix the lights?" she asked, her voice carrying the slight slur that often accompanied traumatic brain injuries. "Lisa said someone might come to help when the power went funny." Mico's throat tightened as he knelt beside her bed, struck by how much she resembled the photographs he'd seen in newspaper archives. 4 years of hidden captivity had stolen her childhood, but her spirit remained intact in ways that spoke to incredible resilience. "I'm here to take you somewhere safe," he said gently, using the tone he'd perfected for Sofia's nighttime fears. "Your friend Lisa is waiting outside. We're going to make sure you can see the sun again." Elena's smile was radiant despite the circumstances. "Really? I've been drawing pictures of outside. Lisa shows me books with trees and birds and other children. Are there really places where kids can run around whenever they want?" The innocence of her question nearly broke Mico's resolve. This child had spent 4 years believing that her underground room was normal, that other children lived the same restricted existence. The psychological damage went far beyond her physical injuries, representing a calculated cruelty that made Mico's hands shake with suppressed rage. Lisa appeared in the doorway, her medical bag slung over one shoulder and determination written across her features. "Elena, sweetheart, we need to move quickly. Remember how we talked about adventures? This is the beginning of ours." But as they helped Elena into the wheelchair Lisa had brought, the mansion's main power suddenly restored itself with a hum that vibrated through the walls. Emergency lights switched back to normal illumination, and somewhere above them, the security system began its restart sequence with electronic chirps and beeps. "That's not possible," Mico muttered, checking his phone for the time. "The power restoration wasn't scheduled for another 10 minutes. Lisa's face went pale as understanding dawned. "He knows." Somehow, Robert figured out what we're doing. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway confirmed their worst fears. Chen had returned, and their carefully planned escape route was about to become a trap. Mico's mind raced through alternatives, backup plans he'd hoped they wouldn't need. The mansion's layout was burned into his memory from years of electrical work, but navigating it while protecting a disabled child and evading a desperate man would require more than technical knowledge. "The service tunnels," he said, remembering blueprints he'd studied during the smart home installation. "There's an old steam tunnel system that connects to the neighbor's property. It hasn't been used in decades, but it should still be accessible." Elena gripped the armrests of her wheelchair with white knuckles, her initial excitement transforming into the kind of fear that came from years of understanding that escape attempts had consequences. "He'll be angry," she whispered. "When Daddy gets angry, people go away and don't come back." The casual way she delivered that observation sent ice through Mico's veins. How many people had Chen eliminated to protect his secret? How many Lisas had there been before the current one, caretakers who'd developed too much conscience or too many questions? Heavy footsteps echoed through the mansion above them, moving with purposeful determination toward the basement access. Chen wasn't alone. Mico could hear at least 2 other sets of footsteps, probably private security personnel who asked no questions and left no witnesses. "This way," Lisa said, leading them deeper into the medical suite toward a maintenance door Mico hadn't noticed during his previous visits. "There is a connection to the old utility systems back here. I've been planning this route for months." The maintenance corridor was narrow and filled with pipes and electrical conduits that made wheelchair navigation nearly impossible. Mico lifted Elena from her chair, surprised by how light she was, how fragile 4 years of captivity had left her. She wrapped her arms around his neck with complete trust, a gesture that reminded him powerfully of Sofia's bedtime hugs. Behind them, the hidden panels slid open with a hydraulic whisper that meant Chen had discovered their escape route. His voice carried through the medical suite, cold with controlled fury that was somehow more terrifying than shouting would have been. "Lisa, I'm very disappointed in you. We had an agreement. Elena's care was your responsibility, and keeping her safe meant keeping her hidden. Now you've involved outsiders who don't understand the complexities of her situation." They moved through the maintenance tunnel as quickly as silence would allow, Lisa leading with a small flashlight while Mico carried Elena and tried to avoid the maze of pipes and electrical boxes that lined the narrow space. Elena's breathing was labored, the excitement and fear taking a toll on her compromised system. "Almost there," Lisa whispered, pointing toward a junction where the tunnel intersected with what looked like an older, larger passage. "The steam tunnels are just beyond that access panel." But as they reached the junction, the maintenance tunnel suddenly flooded with light from behind them. Chen's security team had found their route, and the narrow space that had offered concealment was about to become a fatal bottleneck. "Mr. Rodriguez." Chen's voice echoed through the tunnel, amplified by the confined space. "I believe we need to have a conversation about your daughter Sofia. Such a bright child, so trusting. It would be unfortunate if she were to have an accident while walking home from school tomorrow." The threat hit Mico like a physical blow, confirming his worst fears about the lengths Chen would go to protect his secret. This wasn't just about Elena anymore. It was about whether a father could save one child without sacrificing his own. Elena's small voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I recorded everything, Daddy." Her words echoed in the narrow tunnel, carrying a strength that 4 years of captivity hadn't diminished. "Lisa taught me how to use the tablet when you weren't watching. I know what you did to Mommy." The silence that followed was deafening. Chen's confident threats died in his throat, as the implications of his daughter's words sank in. Lisa had been preparing for this moment longer than any of them realized, teaching Elena to document her captivity and Chen's admissions of guilt during his rare visits to her hidden room. Mico seized the moment of confusion, carrying Elena through the access panel into the steam tunnels while Lisa triggered an emergency beacon she'd hidden in her medical bag. The device sent predetermined signals to federal authorities Lisa had been secretly coordinating with for months, agents who specialized in cases involving missing children and powerful suspects. The old steam tunnels opened into the neighboring property's basement, exactly as the blueprints had promised. As they emerged into the cool night air through a forgotten maintenance shed, federal vehicles were already surrounding the Chen mansion. Lisa's careful documentation and Elena's recordings had provided the evidence needed for immediate action. Chen's empire crumbled within hours. His financial records revealed payments to corrupt officials, cover-ups of multiple suspicious deaths, and a network of criminal activity that extended far beyond Elena's captivity. The man who had seemed untouchable discovered that even unlimited wealth couldn't silence a brave child's testimony. 6 months later, Mico found himself in a very different kind of mansion. Elena's new foster home with Lisa, who had become her legal guardian, was filled with sunshine and laughter. The medical equipment was still there, but it occupied a bright room with windows overlooking a garden where Elena tended flowers with the determination she'd once used to survive captivity. Sofia and Elena had become inseparable friends, their bond forged through shared understanding of loss and recovery. They attended the same school now, Elena slowly catching up on years of missed education, while Sofia helped her navigate the social complexities of childhood friendships. Mico's electrical business had expanded beyond his wildest dreams. Contracts flowing in from grateful families who understood that sometimes the most important repairs weren't to buildings, but to broken lives. He still took emergency calls at midnight, but now Sofia knew that her father's work sometimes involved more than fixing power grids. On quiet evenings, when both girls were safely asleep after days filled with homework and playground adventures, Mico would think about the choices that had brought them all together. A single moment of moral courage had transformed 4 lives, proving that ordinary people possessed extraordinary power when they chose to act on their convictions. Elena still drew pictures, but now they showed blue skies and green grass, friends laughing on swings, and families gathered around dinner tables. The backwards E had disappeared from her signature, replaced by confident letters that spelled out dreams of becoming a doctor who helped other children heal from trauma. Chen spent his remaining years in federal prison, his wealth and influence rendered meaningless by the testimony of the daughter he'd tried to erase. His downfall served as a reminder that true power belonged not to those who accumulated money and control, but to those who protected the vulnerable and spoke truth regardless of personal cost. The electrician who had simply wanted to fix a power outage had instead illuminated the darkness hiding in plain sight, proving that sometimes the most important circuits to repair were the connections between human hearts. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.